Hey guys, tonight we're going to be exploring some of history's most enduring and unsettling tales. We're delving into a world where the final resting place is anything but restful. For most of human history, a burial site was not seen as a peaceful park for quiet contemplation. It was the territory of the dead, a place of immense power and profound fear, you see. The dead were not always the most welcoming of neighbors. Tonight, you're about to become a professional investigator of their grievances. As we explore the horrifying beliefs about ghosts that haunt their own graves, now for our little reality check. We live in an age that has largely sanitized death, tucking it away in quiet, well-manicured cemeteries. But in the past, death and the dead were an intimate part of daily life, and the fear of a restless spirit was a very real and practical concern. A strange noise from the churchyard wasn't just the wind. It was a potential sign that a recently buried and deeply unpopular neighbor was about to come back to file a complaint. Supernaturally speaking, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is the only thing that keeps the ghosts of this channel from rattling their chains. And as always, I love seeing where you're joining from. So please post your city and your local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story begins in the year 1888 in a small, cramped, and dusty set of rooms in London. You are a young man with a new and rather expensive degree in history and folklore from the University of Oxford. You are armed with a scholar's passion for the past, a rigorously skeptical mind, and a purse that is almost entirely empty. Your days are spent in the great library of the British Museum, researching ancient ballads and folk customs, dreaming of a grand academic career that seems stubbornly out of reach. That is, until the letter arrives. It is an invitation, written in a spidery but elegant hand on heavy, cream-colored paper. It is from Dr. Alistair Finch, the most famous and respected antiquarian and folklorist in all of England. He has read an article you published on local burial customs and wishes to discuss a matter of mutual interest. You arrive at his house in a quiet, respectable London square. You are shown into his study, and you feel as though you have stepped into the very heart of the world you have only ever read about. The room is a floor-to-ceiling labyrinth of books. But between the bookshelves, on every available surface, is a museum of the macabre and the strange. You see a framed piece of a hangman's rope, a collection of oddly shaped stones from a megalithic tomb, a glass case containing a grotesque witch bottle, and framed rubbings of ancient, worn tombstones. Dr. Finch himself is a small, bird-like man, ancient and wiry, with eyes that sparkle with a fierce, intelligent curiosity. "So," he says, after you have sat down, "you are the young man who writes of graves. You have a taste for the morbid, I see." He explains his life's great work. For 50 years, he has been compiling a massive encyclopedic catalog of supernatural folklore. A great work he calls the Geographia Sepulchralis, or the Geography of the Grave. His goal is to create a complete taxonomy of every type of ghost, spirit, and revenant said to haunt a burial site, from all corners of the world. "But I'm too old to travel now," he says, a note of genuine sadness in his voice. "My bones are too brittle for clambering over churchyard walls in the dead of night. I require a field agent, a young, energetic man with a scholarly mind and a strong constitution. I require an assistant to go out into the world and collect these stories for me. I believe you are that man. He offers you a position that makes your heart leap. He will pay you a generous salary and cover all your travel expenses. Your job will be to travel to places where such stories are still told, to interview the local vicars and the old storytellers, and to meticulously document the legends of their unquiet dead." You've been hired by a famous scholar to travel the world collecting ghost stories. It's the best paying and most interesting job a young folklorist could dream of. Though it does involve spending an unusual amount of time in creepy, old cemeteries after dark, you, a man of science in the new academic discipline of folklore. Make your position clear. Dr. Finch, you say. You must understand. I am a collector of beliefs and stories. I do not, myself, believe in ghosts. Finch waves a dismissive, bird-like hand. Excellent, he says. I do not require a believer. I require a precise and unbiased observer. Whether the ghosts are real or not is irrelevant to our work. The fear of them is profoundly real, and that is our true subject. Your skepticism is an asset, not a hindrance. He gives you your first assignment, a test case to see if you have the mettle for the work. He has received a series of letters from a nervous country parson in a remote parish in Somerset. The churchyard there, the parson writes, is troubled by a persistent and deeply sorrowful ghost. Dr. Finch provides you with your tools: a sturdy leather traveling case, a stack of thick, leather-bound notebooks and pots of the finest black ink, a camera with its cumbersome tripod and heavy glass plates, a modern scientific instrument to capture what you see, and he gives you a detailed questionnaire he has developed, a tool for your investigations. What is the appearance of the apparition? At what time does it appear? What is the story of the person buried in the grave? You leave his study feeling as though you have been commissioned by a great general for a grand campaign. You are no longer just a poor, struggling scholar. You are now a professional investigator of the supernatural, an archivist of the uncanny. A week later, you're on a train, chugging your way out of the smoky, sprawling chaos of London and into the green, misty countryside of the West Country. You look out the window at the rolling hills and the ancient, slumbering landscape. You have your notebook in your lap, your camera safely stowed. You are excited, a young academic on his first great field expedition. You are on your way to collect a ghost story, to catalog a piece of dying rural superstition with the same detached scientific curiosity you would bring to collecting a local folk song or a quaint country proverb. You are entirely confident in your own modern, rational worldview. You are sure that what you will find is a simple story, a product of isolation and ignorance. You have no idea how much this journey, and the many journeys to come, will begin to chip away at the foundations of your comfortable, scholarly certainty. Your journey to the village of Oakhaven, in the heart of Somerset, is a descent into a landscape of green hills, misty valleys, and profound, ancient quiet. The railway line ends miles away, and you travel the last part of your journey by horse and cart along muddy, rutted lanes. You arrive in a village so remote. You're fairly certain the last time they had a visitor was when the Normans invaded. It is a place of stone cottages with thick, thatched roofs, all clustered around a small, stern-looking Norman church. You are met by the man who wrote to your patron, the village parson, a Reverend Hale. He is a young man, his face pale and troubled, a man of books and theology who seems ill at ease in this world of old stones and older beliefs. He leads you to his small, chilly vicarage. "Thank you for coming," he says, his hands trembling slightly as he pours you a cup of weak tea. Dr. Finch's name is, of course. Legendary. I hope you can make some sense of this unfortunate local fancy. You begin your formal investigation, opening your notebook and consulting the questionnaire Dr. Finch provided. You ask the parson to recount the story. It is a persistent and miserable legend. He begins, "For as long as anyone can remember, the parishioners have spoken of a light in the churchyard. They call it the lich light, the corpse light. They say that on damp, moonless nights, particularly in the winter, a small, faint, Weeping light is seen hovering over a patch of ground on the north side of the churchyard. He pauses, looking deeply uncomfortable. Sometimes, he adds in a low voice, they say you can hear the sound of a baby crying on the wind. And who do they believe this ghost to be, you ask, your pen scratching on the page? The spirit of an unbaptized infant, the parson says, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The story is that 100 years ago, a poor, unwed girl gave birth to a stillborn child, or a child who died before I, or my predecessor, could administer the holy sacrament of baptism. He then explains the terrible, logical, and deeply disturbing theology that gives birth to such a ghost. According to the teachings of the great St. Augustine, he says, his voice taking on the rote quality of a sermon, a soul that leaves this world without the cleansing grace of baptism is still stained by the original sin of Adam. It cannot enter the kingdom of heaven, so it is condemned to hell. You ask, that is the great and terrible question, he replies, his own spiritual struggle clear in his eyes. The child has committed no personal sin. To condemn it to the eternal fire seems a cruelty beyond even the justice of God. And so, the doctors of the church have reasoned that such souls exist in a special state, the limbus infantum, the limbo of the infants. He describes limbo. It is not a place of fire, it is a place of eternal, sorrowful twilight, an edge of hell where these innocent souls live forever. Their only punishment, a profound, unending sadness, for they can see the light of heaven but can never, ever reach it. And this, he says with a heavy sigh, is the source of our local haunting, because the child could not be buried in the consecrated ground of the churchyard proper. It was interred, as was the custom, in the unhallowed earth on the north side of the church. He explains that the north side, which lives in the perpetual shadow of the church building, was considered the devil's side, a place for the outcast dead. The ghost, the people believe, is the sad, lonely spirit of the child, forever trapped, weeping at the edge of the holy ground it can never enter. The next day, you continue your investigation. Speaking to the villagers, you interview an old woman who swears she saw the lich light just last winter. A sad wee thing it was, she says, her eyes wide, like a lost star, weeping in the mist. You speak to the sexton, who points out the spot on the north side of the church, a patch of lumpy, unmarked ground just by the crumbling stone wall. That's the place, he says gruffly. Nothing ever seems to grow right there. That night, you decide you must perform your duty as a proper field agent. You must hold a vigil. The parson, looking slightly horrified at the idea, gives you the key to the church. You climb the narrow, winding stone steps to the belfry. From its high, arched opening, you have a perfect, unobstructed view of the entire churchyard below. The night is cold and damp. A thick mist rolls in from the surrounding moors, muffling all sound and blurring the edges of the old tombstones. For hours, you sit on the cold stone, a blanket wrapped around you, and you watch, and you see nothing but the slow, silent swirling of the fog. You're beginning to feel foolish. A man on a child's errand. The glamorous life of a professional folklorist continues. Then, in the deepest part of the night, in that dark hour just before the dawn, you see it. It is not a ghost. It is not a figure. It is just a light, a small, faint, and utterly inexplicable ball of pale, phosphorescent light. It seems to rise from the very ground itself, from the exact spot the sexton had pointed out. It hovers a few feet above the earth, wavering, pulsing with a gentle, silent rhythm. It is not a lantern. Its light is too cold, too ethereal. Your rational scientific mind immediately leaps to an explanation. Marsh gas, ignis fatuus. The natural combustion of phosphine and methane from the decaying organic matter in the damp ground. It is a known, if rare, natural phenomenon, But as you watch the lonely, silent light dance and weep in the darkness, another part of you, a part you did not know existed, is not so sure. The light seems sad. It seems alive. You quickly set up your camera on its tripod. A clumsy, frantic process in the dark. You open the shutter for a long exposure, hoping to capture the light, knowing that the primitive glass plates are unlikely to register something so faint. After a few minutes, the light flickers one last time, and then it is gone. Fading back into the damp earth from which it came, you sit in the belfry until the sun rises. The rational and the irrational warring in your mind. You spend the next day in the vicarage, writing your formal report for Dr. Finch. You dutifully record the local legend. You detail the theological beliefs about the limbo of the infants that gave birth to the story. And you describe what you saw. You offer the logical, scientific explanation of ignis fatuus. But as you finish, you find yourself adding a final, more personal note. You write of the profound sadness of the story, of the miserable fate of an infant, rejected in death by the very faith that was meant to offer it comfort. You write that the true haunting in this village is not the strange, sad light in the churchyard, but the cruel and unforgiving doctrine that put it there. You have collected your first story. You have found not a terrifying monster, but a miserable legend, born of a harsh theology and a deep, unending parental sorrow. Your journey into the world's haunted graves has begun not with a scream, but with the quiet, heartbreaking whisper of a lost and lonely child. You send your detailed report on the sad lich light of Oakhaven back to Dr. Finch in London. His reply is a letter full of praise for your meticulous work and your empathetic insights. He is so pleased, in fact, that he has decided your next assignment will be your first international one. I have received a letter from a colleague, he writes. A fellow antiquarian named Signor Bellini, who resides in Rome. He speaks of a matter that may be of great interest to our Geographia Sepulcralis. A farmer, while clearing new land for an olive grove on his property outside the city, has unearthed a previously unknown Roman tomb. The local peasants now refuse to work the field. Claiming the tomb is haunted, you will travel to Italy at once. And so, your journey into the world of the unquiet dead continues. You travel by steamship and by rail. A long, rumbling journey from the cool, green mists of England to the hot, sun-baked, and ancient landscape of the Italian countryside. The change is profound. The world becomes a place of cypress trees, of dusty roads, and of a brilliant, almost overpoweringly blue sky. You meet your new host, Signor Bellini, a cheerful, portly, and immensely knowledgeable Italian scholar. At his beautiful villa outside Rome, he welcomes you with a glass of fine wine and a passion for the subject that rivals Dr. Finch's own. Ah, the angry ghost of the Via Anicia, he says with a robust laugh after you have settled in. The local farmers are terrified. They speak of a hateful wind that blows from the tomb at dusk, and the sound of chains rattling. One shepherd swore he saw a dark, menacing shape rise from the entrance. It is a classic haunting. Textbook. The next day, he takes you to the site. It is not on one of the grand, famous roads like the Appian Way, with its magnificent mausoleums. It is on an old, forgotten secondary road, a path overgrown with weeds. And there, on the side of a hill, is the tomb. It is a simple, humble affair, a subterranean chamber cut into the soft tufa rock. Its entrance a simple stone doorway that had been covered by centuries of earth and landslides. We believe it is the tomb of a low-status freedman or perhaps a disgraced citizen from the late imperial period. Bellini explains, the burial was clearly a hasty and poor one. That is the key to our current problem. He begins to explain the Roman beliefs about the dead, a lesson that brings the scholarly texts you have read to life. You must understand, he says, that for the Romans, not all ghosts were created equal. The blessed spirits of the ancestors, the manes, were honored and peaceful, but the spirit of a man buried without the proper rites, without the necessary offerings, or with a great grievance in his heart. That spirit becomes a lemur, a hungry, angry, and malevolent ghost, trapped between worlds, filled with envy for the living, the farmers, by unearthing this tomb. He continues, have disturbed a sleeping anger. They have opened the door to a house that has been sealed in its misery for 1,500 years. His theory is that the poor. Hasty burial of the tomb's occupant is the source of the haunting. He points out the lack of any protective symbols carved over the doorway. No charms to ward off evil. The spirit inside was left vulnerable, and its sorrow has had centuries to curdle into rage. The ghost stories you are collecting, you learn, are not just about the dead, but about the quality of their death. The sad baby ghost in Somerset was a creature of theological neglect. This Roman ghost is a creature of ritual neglect. You decide you must see the inside of the tomb for yourself. Bellini agrees, though he insists you go in the bright light of midday with lanterns. You descend the few rough-hewn steps and enter the burial chamber. It is a small, damp, and musty-smelling square room. Cut from the rock, it is almost completely empty. In the center is a simple, plain stone sarcophagus. The farmers who discovered it have already pried the heavy lid off. Inside, there is nothing but a thin layer of dark dust and a few brittle fragments of bone. Whatever treasures this man had, if any, are long gone. You spend the rest of the day following your professional method. You interview the local farmers, using Dr. Finch's questionnaire. Their stories are all similar, the feeling of being watched, the unnatural cold from the tomb entrance, the frightening noises at night. The evidence for the haunting includes angry noises and a hateful wind. It's not much to go on in a court of law, but in the middle of the night next to a spooky old tomb. It's surprisingly convincing. That evening, you and Signor Bellini decide to hold a vigil. You will not be as foolhardy as to sit inside the tomb itself. You position yourselves on the hillside above, with a clear view of the dark, gaping doorway, a bottle of wine to keep you company, as the sun sets and the landscape is painted in the soft colors of a Roman twilight. The atmosphere changes. A profound silence falls over the fields. A silence that seems to emanate from the tomb itself. Then, as the last of the light fades, an unnatural chill begins to seep out of the dark doorway below. A cold that has nothing to do with the evening air. It is a heavy, oppressive cold, and you feel it even from your vantage point 100 yards away. Then you hear it. It is not the sad, faint weeping of the lich-light. It is a low, guttural, and undeniably angry moaning sound, seeming to echo up from deep within the earth. It is a sound of pure, ancient misery and rage. It is followed by a harsh, grating, scraping sound, like a heavy stone being dragged across a rough floor. You and Bellini sit in stunned silence, the wine forgotten. You, the skeptical English folklorist, and he, the cheerful Italian antiquarian. You are both just two frightened men, listening to a sound that should not exist. The moaning continues for nearly an hour, a raw and sorrowful complaint from a throat that has been dust for over a millennium. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stops. The cold recedes. The silence that returns is just the normal. Peaceful silence of a country night. You have your evidence. You return to your lodgings. Your mind reeling, you have now collected your second ghost. The first was a being of pure sorrow, a sad and lonely light. This one is a being of pure rage, a voice of ancient grievance. You write your report to Dr. Finch, your hand unsteady. You describe the local legends, the theory of the neglected lemur, and you detail the terrible, angry sounds you heard with your own ears. Your scholarly detachment has been dealt another, more serious, blow as you finish your report. You look at the books Bellini has lent you. You have learned about the spirits of those buried improperly. You wonder now about the other side of the coin. What of the spirits of the great and the powerful? Those buried with all the correct rites and honors. What kind of ghosts do they become? Your journey into the horrifying beliefs about haunted burial sites. You know, must now take you to the land that is most famous for its magnificent and its famously cursed tombs. You must go to Egypt. You must go to... Your report on the angry Roman lemur greatly excites Dr. Finch. A classic case of a spirit with a grievance. He writes back to you. You have documented the sorrowful ghost and the angry ghost. Your education is progressing admirably now. You must travel to the oldest of all lands. You must go to Egypt. Your journey takes you from the familiar hills of Italy across the Great Sea to the port of Alexandria, and then by a noisy, puffing steamboat up the long, shimmering ribbon of the Nile, you arrive in Luxor, the modern town that sits beside the ruins of ancient Thebes, the greatest city of the dead in the world. The atmosphere here in the 1880s is a strange and heady mix of ancient mystery and modern, industrial-scale enterprise. The air is filled with the dust of a dozen different archaeological digs, the shouts of foremen, and the chatter of wealthy European and American tourists. You are not here to dig for treasure, however. You are here to dig for stories. You know that the European archaeologists, for all their scientific brilliance, are often deaf to the local, living folklore that surrounds the tombs they excavate. To understand the haunting of these places, you must speak to the people whose ancestors have lived and died in the shadow of the necropolis for 1,000 years. You hire a local guide, an old man from the village of Kurna named Mahmud. His village is a strange and remarkable place, built literally on top of and inside the ancient, empty tombs of the Theban nobles. He has lived his entire life in the company of the dead. You explain your mission. You want to learn the stories of the ghosts that haunt the tombs. Mahmud looks at you with his wise, roomy eyes and gives a slow, knowing smile. The Effendi misunderstands, he says. His English heavily accented. The great ones in the tombs, they are not ghosts. A ghost is a weak, sad thing. A spirit with no home. The spirit in the tomb of a great lord. He is not a ghost. He is the master, still in his house, and he does not like to be disturbed. He begins to teach you the local understanding of the soul, a belief passed down for generations, a folk survival of the ancient religion. He tells you of the Ka, the spiritual double, the life force of a person that remains in the tomb after death. The Ka must have food and drink. Mahmud explains, and it must guard its home and its treasures. A powerful lord in life has a powerful Ka in death. To enter his tomb without permission, without speaking his name in reverence, is not to trespass in an empty house. It is to walk into the lion's den while the lion is still there. Your guide explains that every dead noble has a guardian spirit called a Ka living in their tomb. It's like a supernatural security guard, but one that has been on duty for 3,000 years and is probably not in a good mood. He agrees to show you a tomb with a particularly fearsome reputation. He leads you up into the hot, sun-blasted hills of the Theban necropolis, to a tomb that is well known to the local people but of little interest to the European archaeologists. As its treasures were stolen long ago, it is the tomb of a nobleman named Nachtman, a general under one of the great pharaohs. No one from my village will enter this place, Mahmud says, stopping a safe distance from the dark, square entrance cut into the limestone cliff. Not even for the promise of gold. He tells you the story. He says that in his grandfather's time, a gang of foolish young men, not from Kurna but from a distant village, decided to try their luck and rob the tomb, hoping some treasure had been missed. They went in at night. They were never seen again, but on the night of the full moon, Mahmud says, his voice dropping to a whisper, if you are foolish enough to be near this place, you can sometimes hear sounds from within, not the moaning of a sad spirit, the screams of men, as if they are being punished for all eternity by the angry Ka of the general they tried to rob. The story is a chilling one. The haunting here is not a miserable legend. It is a tale of a powerful, proprietary guardian. A spirit that does not just frighten, but actively punishes trespassers, enslaving their souls for all time. You approach the tomb's entrance. Despite Mahmud's fearful warnings, you do not go in, but you stand at the threshold. At the very edge of the cool darkness that spills out from the rock, the air that comes from the tomb is still, and heavy with the scent of ancient dust and something else. A faint, dry, mineral smell. You stand there for a long time, and you feel it. It is not a sound. It is not a cold spot. It is a profound and undeniable sense of presence. A feeling of being watched, of being assessed by a powerful, patient, and entirely non-human intelligence. It is not angry, like the Roman lemur. It is simply there, a silent guardian at its post, eternal and unmoving. You back away from the entrance. A new and profound respect for the Egyptian beliefs taking root in your mind. You are witnessing a core part of a worldview that future scholars will debate for centuries. Was the fear of the curse an ancient belief, or a modern invention? You, standing in the hot sun of the necropolis, listening to the old stories, feeling that ancient, watchful presence. Know the truth. The fear is as old as the tombs themselves. You spend your days in Thebes documenting these beliefs. You write of the powerful guardian Ka, and you recount Mahmud's grim tale of the trapped tomb robbers. You have collected your third ghost story, and you realize that this one is different from all the others. The unbaptized child was a ghost born of sorrow. The Roman lemur was a ghost born of anger and neglect. But this Egyptian guardian is a ghost born of success. It is a spirit doing exactly what it was meant to do, performing its eternal duty as protector of its house. The haunting is not a sign of a failed ritual, but of a ritual that worked perfectly as you prepare to leave Egypt, your work here complete. You sit on the balcony of your hotel in Luxor, watching the felucca boats sail on the Nile at sunset. Your research has taken you across Europe and now to Africa. You have found ghosts of sorrow, of anger, and of duty. Your mind, the mind of a collector, a cataloger, turns now to the lands even further east. You have read in the books of travelers and missionaries of the strange and elaborate beliefs of the Far East. You have read of Japan, a land of 1,000 gods, a place where the spirits of the dead are believed to be capable of a terrible and focused vengeance. A land of a different kind of ghost, born not of neglect or duty, but of a burning, personal injustice. Your journey into the world's haunted graves, you decide, must continue. Your journey to the Far East is the longest and most disorienting of your life. You travel by steamship, a long voyage across the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. A journey of many weeks that leaves the worlds of Europe and Egypt feeling like a distant dream. You have come to Meiji-era Japan, a nation in the throes of a profound and dizzying transformation. You arrive in the bustling port city of Yokohama and find a world caught between two ages. You see men in traditional silk kimonos and wooden sandals walking past new European-style brick buildings. You hear the ancient sound of a temple gong mingling with the shrill whistle of a modern steam train. The culture shock is giving you a headache through the contacts provided by Dr. Finch's scholarly network. You are introduced to a professor at the Imperial University in Tokyo. He is a man named Professor Tanaka, a historian like yourself, but one who is trying to apply the new Western methods of folklore and history to the ancient, and often dark, legends of his own people. He is fascinated by your Geographia Sepulchralis and agrees to share his own knowledge with you. You tell him of the spirits you have studied so far, the sad, neglected ghost of the English child, the angry, territorial Roman lemur, the powerful, dutiful Egyptian Ka. Professor Tanaka listens, nodding thoughtfully. These are all ghosts of circumstance, he says, his English precise and academic. They are spirits defined by the failure of their burial rites, or by their sacred duty. But we have another kind of ghost in Japan, a ghost that is not born of ritual, but of a great and terrible emotion. A ghost that is not concerned with its own grave, but only with revenge. We call it an onryo. He explains that an onryo is one of the most powerful and feared spirits in Japanese folklore. It is almost always the ghost of a woman who was betrayed, tormented, and murdered by a deceitful or ambitious husband or lover. Her love, in death, is transformed by the terrible injustice she suffered into a burning, all-consuming rage, a thirst for vengeance so powerful that it allows her spirit to cling to this world and exert its will in a direct and terrifying way. Japanese ghosts, you're learning, are very goal-oriented. To illustrate, he tells you a classic and terrible story. The local legend of a woman named Oyuki, whose grave, he says, is not far from the city. Oyuki was a beautiful and devoted wife to a low-ranking but ambitious samurai. Her husband, however, fell in love with the daughter of a powerful lord and wished to marry her to advance his own station. But he could not divorce Oyuki, so he and his new lover conspired to be rid of her. They poisoned her, but the poison was a slow one, designed to mimic a wasting disease. As she lay dying, they tormented her, telling her of their plans in her final moments. She looked upon her husband, and, with her last breath, she promised him that her love was a thing that death could not kill, and neither could it kill her hate. After she died, her husband, to hide his crime, threw her body down a disused, stone-lined well in the garden of their small estate. The well became her tomb, the professor says, his voice low. And from that unhallowed grave, she returned. He describes the appearance of the onryo, an image that will become iconic in the art and theater of his nation. She appears as she was in death, dressed in a white burial kimono, her face a pale, bluish white, and her long, beautiful black hair, which her husband had once so admired, now hanging in a wild, disheveled, and sometimes prehensile mass around her. In our folklore, the professor explains, a woman's long. Black hair is a symbol of her life force, her power, her very soul. In the onryo, her hair is unbound, a living manifestation of her unrestrained rage. The ghost of Oyuki, Hai tells you, did not simply haunt the well. She began a systematic and terrible campaign of vengeance. Her ghostly face would appear in the tea of her husband's new wife. Her sorrowful, whispering voice would be heard in their bedchamber at night. The new wife was driven to madness and died. The husband's career was ruined. And finally, he was found one morning, dead in his own garden, his face a mask of absolute terror, his body lying at the foot of the old well from which a single, long strand of black hair had been found, wrapped around his neck. You listen, horrified. This is a ghost of a different order entirely. The spirits you have studied before were largely bound to their graves. But the onryo is a hunter. Its grave is not its home. It is an anchor, a source of power from which it can project its will into the world of the living. Professor Tanaka takes you to the site. The remains of an old, crumbling samurai estate in the countryside outside Tokyo. And he shows you the well. It is ancient, its stone rim covered in a thick, green carpet of moss. It is a dark, silent, and profoundly sorrowful place. You are now staring at a creepy, old, moss-covered well that is supposedly the grave of a vengeful ghost. The professor asks if you want to look inside. You decide you are perfectly happy appreciating its historical significance from a safe distance. You see that local people have left small offerings at its edge, a few flowers, a stick of incense. They do not pray to her. The professor explains. They pray for her. This is the influence of the Buddha's teachings. They are trying to soothe her rage, to convince her to let go of her earthly attachment to her own vengeance and find peace. Future scholars will debate the meaning of the Onryo legend. Is it a reflection of the oppressed status of women in a feudal society? A supernatural outlet for a rage that could not be expressed in life? Or is it a Buddhist-influenced cautionary tale about the karmic horrors of being consumed by hatred? Standing at the edge of that dark, silent well, you feel that it is both. You write your report for Dr. Mulfinch. You describe the legend of the Onryo, a ghost born not of a failure of ritual, but of a failure of human morality. A haunting caused not by a disturbed grave, but by a terrible injustice. The grave is not the source of the haunting. The crime is, you have now collected the stories of ghosts born of sorrow, of anger, of duty, and now, of vengeance. Your journey has taken you further than you ever imagined. As you prepare to leave Japan, you read of the cold, northern lands of Scandinavia, and of the stories of their Viking ancestors. You read of their burial mounds, and of a ghost that is not a spirit at all, but a physical, reanimated corpse of immense strength, a creature that guards its grave not with a sorrowful presence, but with brutal, physical violence. Your work is not yet done. Your voyage from the intricate, modernizing world of Meiji Japan to the stark, ancient landscapes of Scandinavia is a journey across the entire breadth of the world, and it feels, through time itself, you sail west, leaving the land of the vengeful Onryo behind, and after many long weeks, you arrive in the cool, green, and rugged kingdom of Denmark. Here, the air is clean and sharp, the sky is a pale, watery blue, and the land is dotted with the gentle, rounded shapes of ancient burial mounds. Your research has led you here to investigate a very different, and far more brutal, kind of burial site haunting. You have studied the ghosts that are born of sorrow, of anger, of neglect, and of vengeance. Now, you will learn of a ghost that is born of pure, undying greed. You travel to Copenhagen, where you meet with a professor at the university, an elderly and deeply knowledgeable historian named Dr. Jensen. He is a master of the Old Norse sagas, the great, bloody epics of the Viking Age. When you tell him of your quest to document the world's haunted tombs, a grim smile touches his lips. "Ah," he says, his study filled with the comfortable clutter of old books and maps. "You have been studying the spirits, the phantoms, the geists. But here in the north, our most famous dead are not so, ethereal. Our ancestors did not believe in flimsy ghosts. They believed in a creature with weight, and strength, and a very bad temper. They believed in the Draugr." He explains the nature of this terrifying entity. The Draugr, he tells you, is not a spirit that has left its body. It is the body, a reanimated corpse that remains in its burial mound, or hogger, possessed of a malevolent, unnatural life. It is not a sad, wandering soul. It is a monstrous, physical beast. The sagas are full of them. Dr. Jensen explains. A great Viking chieftain, especially one who was known for his greed and his love of treasure in life, was believed to continue that greed in death. He would awaken in his barrow, a creature of immense strength, his skin often blue or black with decay, his eyes burning with a cold, hateful light, and his only purpose is to guard the gold and the swords that were buried with him. The professor describes the creature's powers. As told in the old stories, a Draugr can swell its size to that of an ox. It can control the weather, calling down a localized fog or storm to confuse trespassers. And it is not always confined to its mound. At night, the most powerful of them can wander the countryside, killing livestock, riding on the roofs of farmhouses, and bringing a creeping madness to any who see them. The ancient Vikings had the best tomb security system. They didn't use curses or traps. They just used the angry, reanimated corpse of the owner. It was very direct and probably very effective. He tells you of a specific and famous barrow, a day's journey from the city, the legendary tomb of a Viking sea king named Hrolf the Greedy. The local farmers, Dr. Jensen says, still fear the place. They say that sheep that graze too close to the mound are sometimes found torn apart, and that a strange, cold light can be seen on top of the barrow on winter nights. You travel with the professor to see the place for yourself. The barrow of King Hrolf is a massive, man-made hill on a high, wind-swept ridge overlooking the sea. It is covered in thick, wiry grass, and a single, ancient standing stone marks its peak. It feels different from the other burial sites you have visited. The English churchyard felt sad. The Roman tomb felt angry. The Egyptian tomb felt powerful. The Japanese well felt sorrowful. This place feels possessive. It feels like the lair of a great sleeping animal, jealously guarding its territory. You speak with a local farmer, an old man whose land borders the hill. His fear is not of a ghost, but of a physical threat. My grandfather told me his own father saw it, the farmer says, his eyes wide as he looks towards the mound. A great, dark shape, walking the ridge at sunset. It tore the head from one of his prize rams with its bare hands. We do not go near the Hauger after the sun goes down. Future scholars will debate the origins of the Draugr legend. Is it a folk memory of ancestor worship, where the powerful dead were believed to still be alive in their mounds? Is it a literary trope to create a worthy monster for a hero like Beowulf to fight? Or is it a powerful story created to deter the very real threat of tomb robbers? As you listen to the farmer's genuine, terrified account, you believe it is all three. You and Dr. Jensen do not attempt to enter the tomb. You are a folklorist, not a hero from a saga. You spend the day sketching the barrow, taking photographs of the surrounding landscape, and documenting the local stories. As dusk begins to fall and a cold mist rolls in from the sea, a profound and ancient sense of dread settles over you. You're modern. Scientific mind knows that this is just a hill, a tomb filled with the dust and bones of a long-dead king. But the part of you that has now spent years listening to the world's dark legends is not so sure. That night, back at the local inn, you write your report for Dr. Finch. You describe the legend of the Draugr, a new and terrifying category in your growing bestiary of the unquiet dead. You have studied the sad spirit, the angry ghost, the dutiful guardian, and the vengeful wraith. Now you have documented the monstrous, corporeal undead, a creature born not of sorrow or injustice, but of pure, undying, material greed. You have learned that a haunting can be a quiet whisper, a vengeful hunt, or, it seems, a brutal physical assault. You sit in the warm, lamp-lit inn, the wind howling outside, and you think of all the different ways the dead can plague the living. You have focused so far on the ghosts of individuals, of single, powerful personalities. But as you review your notes, you remember a story you heard from a German colleague, a story of a different kind of haunting altogether. A story not of a single, angry king, but of a whole army of sad, forgotten ghosts. A story of a great, haunted mass grave. Your journey, you realize, must now take you back to the heart of Europe. Your journey takes you from the stark, windswept coasts of Scandinavia back into the heart of the European continent. You travel by train and by carriage into the rolling hills and dark forests of Germany, a land whose history is as rich and as grim as any you have yet encountered. You are here to investigate a story you heard from a German colleague, a story of a haunting that is not of a single, powerful individual, but of a collective. Forgotten sorrow. You arrive in a small, quiet town in a rural duchy. Your contact is the local schoolmaster, a man named Herr Muller, a passionate amateur historian who has spent his life collecting the stories of his region. He welcomes you into his home, a place of neat, ordered books and the faint, sweet scent of pipe tobacco, the place you ask of, he says, his face growing somber. Is one our people called the Kummerfeld, the sorrow field? It is not a place for the living after the sun goes down. He tells you the history of the site. 2 centuries ago, during the terrible 30 Years' War, a great and bloody battle was fought in that very field. 2 massive armies of mercenaries, men from a dozen different nations, annihilated each other in a single day of slaughter. In the aftermath, the victorious but exhausted army had no time for individual burials. They dug a series of great pits and filled them with the thousands of dead from both sides. There is no monument. Herr Muller says, there is no cross. The battle was a meaningless one in a meaningless war, and the men who died there were forgotten by history. But the land has not forgotten. He recounts the local legend. The Kummerfeld is a haunted place, but it is not haunted by a single, terrifying specter. It is haunted by a profound and overwhelming atmosphere of grief. He tells you that people who walk near the field at dusk are often overcome by a sudden, inexplicable wave of deep melancholy. They say you can sometimes hear, on the wind, a sound that is not the wind, but the faint, distant, collective groan of 1,000 men in pain. On misty mornings, faint, gray shapes are sometimes seen drifting over the field, the spectral remnants of the forgotten army, forever reliving their final. Terrible moments. The next day, Herr Muller takes you to the site. It is a large, unremarkable field, slightly uneven, its grasses growing thick and wild. It is bordered on one side by a dark forest. It is utterly, unnervingly quiet. Even the birds in the nearby trees seem to be silent. It is a place that feels as if it is holding its breath. You walk with the schoolmaster across the field. The pits are here, he says, stamping his foot on a long, shallow depression in the earth. And here and here. You realize you are walking over a vast, unmarked cemetery. You are witnessing a phenomenon that future paranormal researchers and folklorists will call a residual haunting. It is not a haunting by a conscious, intelligent spirit. It is a belief in a kind of psychic recording. A traumatic event so powerful that its emotional energy has been permanently imprinted onto the landscape itself. You, the folklorist, must ask yourself the question that will define this debate when you stand in this place and feel its sorrow. Are you feeling a genuine spectral echo? Or are you simply feeling the immense psychological weight of the terrible story you have just been told? To find out. You decide to hold a vigil that evening as the sun begins to set. You return to the sorrow field alone. You sit on a low stone wall at its edge, your notebook in your lap, and you wait as the last of the sun's light fades from the sky. You feel it. It is a palpable change in the atmosphere. A deep, bone-chilling sadness begins to settle over you. A grief that does not feel like your own. It is an external presence. An emotional miasma that seems to rise from the field itself. You feel an overwhelming sense of loss, of futility, of the profound and tragic waste of 1,000 lives cut short. You hear a sound. It could be just the wind sighing through the long grass, but it sounds, unmistakably, like 1,000 distant, sighing voices, a chorus of forgotten pain. You look out across the field. The evening mist is gathering in the low-lying hollows where the pits are. It swirls and drifts, and in the faint, silvery light of the rising moon, the swirling mist seems to form vague, indistinct, human-like shapes. They are not ghosts, they are just mist. But they are shapes. They drift silently across the field, like a slow-motion replay of a battle's aftermath. It is not a terrifying experience. It is a profoundly sad one. You have investigated the lonely ghost of a child, the angry ghost of a Roman, the vengeful ghost of a Japanese woman, and the monstrous ghost of a Viking king. All of them were individuals, their hauntings born of their own personal story. But this is something else. This is the ghost of a historical event. A mass grave has created a mass ghost. You leave the field as the moon climbs high. The deep, sorrowful chill of the place clinging to your soul. You have your report for Dr. Finch. You have documented a new kind of haunting. One that is not personal but communal. Not angry but filled with an overwhelming, eternal grief. You have learned that a burial site can be haunted by the story of a single, forgotten life. Now you know that it can also be haunted by the weight of 1,000 forgotten deaths. As you prepare to leave Germany, you wonder what could possibly be more horrifying than a field that weeps for a ghost army. Your research points you towards the dark forests and remote mountain villages of Eastern Europe, to the folklore of a very different and far more malevolent, kind of unquiet grave. A grave whose occupant is said to not just haunt its resting place, but to rise from it, to return to the world of the living to feed. Your next investigation will be into the grim and terrifying legends of the vampire's grave. Your journey takes you eastward, by train and then by horse-drawn coach, from the familiar, ordered world of Germany into the rugged, mountainous, and deeply forested lands of the Carpathian Basin. The villages here are smaller, more isolated, their wooden houses huddled together in the valleys as if for protection against the vast, ancient forests that surround them. The air of the 19th century, with its steam engines and its scientific rationalism, feels thin here. The old beliefs, you find, are not quaint folklore. They are a living, breathing, and often terrifying reality. You have come here to investigate the most fearsome and malevolent of all the unquiet dead in European folklore. You have come to learn about the vampire. Your guide is a local priest, Father Alban, a man who serves a remote mountain parish. He is a man of God, but his faith is a practical one, deeply intertwined with the ancient fears of his flock. He agrees to tell you what he knows, to help you with your great scholarly work. But he warns you, these are not the sad, weeping ghosts of your English churchyards, he says, his eyes grave. The vampire, the strigoi, is a soulless thing, a demon wearing the skin of the dead. It is a plague with a face. You learn that the vampire of this land's folklore is not the aristocratic, caped nobleman of the new Gothic novels you have read. It is a far more rustic and intimate horror. It is the reanimated corpse of a local man, often someone who was an outcast or a sinner in life, who now rises from his grave, driven by a terrible hunger. And its first victims are always its own family. The sickness is the first sign. Father Alban explains, a strange, wasting illness that seems to drain the life and the very blood from its victims. It will start with the widow, then the sons, then the daughters. The strigoi preys first upon those it loved, for the bonds of blood are its easiest pathway back into the world of the living. You realize that this is a folkloric explanation for the terrible reality of contagious diseases like tuberculosis, which would often consume an entire family, one by one. And how do you know which grave is the source, but you ask? Your pen scratching in your notebook. There are signs, the priest says, his voice low. The people watch. They look for small, unexplained holes in the earth of the grave, like those made by a worm, but larger. They believe these are the holes through which the creature's spirit escapes at night. The ground of the grave itself will be strangely undisturbed. The grass will not grow upon it, and cattle will refuse to walk over it. And sometimes, he adds, making the sign of the cross. A shepherd, passing the graveyard at night, will see the man himself, his own face, his own clothes, but with a terrible pallor and eyes that glow in the dark like a wolf's. He tells you of a village in a neighboring valley that is, at this very moment, in the grip of such a panic. A man named Radu, an unpopular and solitary man, died 2 months ago. Now, His wife is near death from the wasting sickness, and his eldest son has taken to his bed with a terrible pallor and a hacking cough. The villagers are terrified. They believe Radu is the cause. You travel with the priest to this terrified village. It is a grim, fearful place. The people shutter their windows at night and hang braids of garlic from their doorways. They have begged the priest to help them, and he has brought you, the foreign scholar. As an expert witness, that evening, you are taken to the village churchyard. It is a small, windswept place on a hill. The priest and the village elders lead you to Radu's grave. It is a simple earthen mound, and you see them, a series of small, inexplicable holes, about the diameter of your thumb, dotting the surface of the grave. The earth around them is pushed up, as if something has burrowed its way out from below. Your rational mind searches for an explanation. Burrowing insects. A mole, but the holes are too neat, too numerous, and the palpable. Absolute terror of the men standing beside you is a powerful and persuasive force. You stand there in the twilight, a cold wind sweeping down from the mountains. You are not in a lecture hall at Oxford. You are in a place where the line between the natural and the supernatural is thin and porous. You are in a world where vampires are not just a story. They are a clear and present danger. You, the folklorist, are now part of a grim, diagnostic team. You listen as the villagers recount their evidence. A man swears he saw Radu's shape walking in the moonlight near his old house. The dead man's own dog, they say, sits on the grave some nights and howls, a sound of profound and unnatural sorrow. The evidence is, by the standards of your world, anecdotal and superstitious. But here, it is a legal and spiritual indictment. The sickness, the holes, the stories, they all point to one terrible conclusion. As night falls, another of Radu's children, a young girl, is taken by the fever. The panic in the village reaches a breaking point. The village elder, his face a mask of desperate resolve, turns to the priest. And to you, we cannot wait any longer, he says, his voice a harsh whisper. The beast must be destroyed. We must open the grave. We must perform the rite. You know what this means. You have read of it in the old chronicles. The grim, brutal, and terrifying folk rituals for dispatching a vampire. It is a procedure that involves the exhumation and the ritual mutilation of a corpse. Father Alban, the priest, looks at you. You have come to document our ways, he says, his face grim. This is our oldest and most terrible way. We ask that you be present, as a witness for the outside world, to see that what we do not out of savagery, but out of a terrible mortal necessity. You are now being asked to be a formal witness to a ritual that is both a desecration and, in the minds of these terrified people, a holy act of communal self-defense. You stand in the torchlit graveyard, the villagers gathering with their shovels and their sharpened stakes. And you know that your journey into the horrifying beliefs about haunted burial sites is about to reach its most visceral and terrifying chapter. The decision, once made, is acted upon with a terrifying, desperate speed. That very night, a grim procession makes its way to the village churchyard. It is led by the village elder and the priest, Father Alban. They are followed by a small group of the village's strongest and bravest men, their faces stark and determined in the flickering torchlight. They carry shovels, crowbars, and the grim. Specific tools of their terrible trade, a heavy mallet and a newly sharpened stake of hawthorn wood. You and your guide, the priest, are there as witnesses, your presence lending a strange, formal authority to this act of folk justice. You stand back, your notebook in hand. As the men approach the sunken, ill-omened grave of the man named Radu, there is no hesitation. At the elder's command, the men begin to dig, the sound of their shovels biting into the cold. Hard earth is the only sound in the silent churchyard. They work with a frantic energy, their fear fueling their strength. They are not just digging up a grave, they are lancing a boil, cutting out the source of the poison that is killing their village. After a short time, a shovel strikes wood with a dull, hollow thud. The men stop, a collective, fearful gasp going through them. They have reached the coffin. They clear the last of the earth away, revealing the simple pine box. With their crowbars, they pry the lid from the coffin. The screech of the nails a sound of pure agony in the night. The lid is lifted away. The men all stumble back, their hands flying to their faces to ward off the foul, overpowering stench of death and corruption that rises from the open grave. Father Alban begins to chant a prayer in a loud, wavering voice, holding his crucifix before him like a shield. The village elder, his face a mask of grim resolve, holds a torch over the open coffin. "Behold," he cries, his voice a triumphant and terrified shout. "The proof." You force yourself to step forward and look into the coffin. What you see is a sight of pure, folkloric horror, your 19th century. Educated mind knows that you are looking at the natural, if unpleasant, processes of decomposition, but to the terrified eyes of these villagers, you are looking at a monster. The body of Radu is not the dry, peaceful skeleton they expected. The damp, cold earth has slowed its decay. The corpse is bloated from the gases of putrefaction, its skin stretched tight, giving it a plump, horribly well-fed appearance. Post-mortem lividity has settled the blood in the tissues, giving the skin a dark, reddish, plethoric color, as if it is gorged with the fresh blood of its victims. A trickle of dark, sanguineous fluid has escaped its mouth and stained its burial shroud. A grim, wet stain that looks like a vampire's recent meal. This sight is the only evidence they need. This is not a man at rest. This is a beast in its lair. The grim, ritualistic killing of the undead now begins. "The stake," the elder commands. A young man brings forth the sharpened hawthorn stake. The elder explains the ancient logic. The creature must be pinned to the earth, its unholy connection to its grave made a permanent prison. They ask you to hold a torch steady, to provide the best light for their terrible work. You find your hand is shaking, but you obey. You are a folklorist, a collector of stories, and you have just become a participant in the most horrifying tale of your life. Two of the strongest men jump down into the grave. They position the sharp point of the stake over the center of the corpse's chest. The elder takes the heavy mallet. He recites a short, guttural prayer in his own tongue, a pre-Christian charm to bind the evil spirit, and then he begins to strike. The sound is a series of wet, heavy, chunky thuds that seems to echo in your very bones. You do not watch the stake itself, you watch the faces of the villagers, their features illuminated by the torchlight, their expressions a mixture of absolute terror and a grim, righteous satisfaction when the stake has been driven deep, pinning the corpse to the coffin floor beneath. The elder calls for a spade. He declares that to be certain. The head, the seat of the creature's will, must be severed from its body. He performs the final, brutal act himself. You hear the sharp, ugly chop of the spade's edge hitting bone. Finally, the priest steps forward. He takes a handful of dried garlic cloves from a pouch and stuffs them into the mouth of the now mutilated corpse. A final, magical gag to silence its spirit. The ritual is complete. The monster has been destroyed. The men, their work done, scramble out of the grave. They work with a new energy now, a feeling of triumphant relief. To refill the hole, they shovel the earth back in with a kind of fury, tamping it down, burying the horror they have just committed, sealing it away forever when the grave is filled. Father Alban performs a final, powerful prayer of binding and cleansing over the now unmarked plot of land. The villagers, Their faces still pale, but their eyes no longer filled with the same desperate fear. Begin to disperse. Their whispers a mixture of horror at what they have seen and relief that the ordeal is over. You are left standing in the churchyard with the priest as the first gray light of dawn begins to touch the sky. You are shaking. A deep internal tremor of shock and revulsion. You have seen many of the world's miserable legends. But this was not a story. It was a physical act of brutal, ritualized violence performed by terrified people. Upon the helpless body of the dead, you have learned the final, horrifying truth about the legends of the haunted graves. You have learned that the most disturbing beliefs are the ones that force the living to become monsters, to commit acts of profound desecration, all in the name of protecting themselves from the shadows of their own deepest fears. The night in the Fen village is a wound in your memory. You and Edric return to your home, and you do not speak of what you saw, of what you did, but the memory of it, the sound of the mallet and the terrible silent finality of the act, has changed you. You have seen the darkest corner of the world of the dead, a place where the horror is not what the ghosts do, but what the living do in their fear. Years pass. The world changes. You are an old man now, your hair white, your hands gnarled with age. Your master, Edric, has long since gone to his own peaceful rest in the churchyard, his grave deep and properly sealed by your own hands. You are the master of the guild, a respected if solitary figure. The great antiquarian, Dr. Finch, has also passed away, leaving you his vast collection of notes and the unfinished manuscript of his great work. The Geographia Sepulchralis, your life has become a quiet one, a life of scholarship, of trying to make sense of the lifetime of strange and terrible stories you have collected. The world is entering a new, modern age, an age of science, of steam, of electricity, and a new way of looking at the supernatural has emerged. You are invited to London, to a meeting of a new and fashionable society. It is the Society for Psychical Research. You go. Out of a sense of scholarly curiosity, the meeting is not in a dusty churchyard or a smoky tavern. It is in a clean, well-lit university lecture hall. The members are not frightened peasants or grim-faced priests. They are men of science physicists, doctors, and philosophers, with impressive beards and an air of sober scientific inquiry. They are trying to measure ghosts with thermometers. They invite you to join them on an investigation. A new haunting has been reported at a grave in a cemetery outside London. You agree to go, to see their methods. The investigation is a strange, clinical affair. They arrive at the gravesite armed with cameras, thermometers, and barometers. They set up their equipment with a quiet, focused efficiency. They spend the night watching their instruments, taking meticulous notes, whispering to each other about temperature drops of a few degrees and strange anomalies on their photographic plates. The photographer is very excited because he has captured a faint smudge on his plate. He says it might be an ectoplasmic manifestation. You think it might be his thumbprint. But you decide not to spoil the mood. You watch them, and you feel a profound sense of dislocation. They are trying to capture a ghost with a machine. They are trying to understand a thing of sorrow and terror by measuring the coldness of the air. The experience is utterly sterile. It has no story, no soul. You return to your own quiet home, to the great, unfinished book of Dr. Finch, and you know that you are the only one who can write its final chapter. You sit down at your desk, unroll a fresh sheet of parchment, and begin to write your own conclusion. The wisdom you have purchased with a lifetime of experience. You have spent your life collecting the stories of the dead. You write, and you have learned that ghosts are not all of the same tribe. They are born of different sorrows, different fears. Some ghosts, you write, are born of a theological cruelty. They are the sad, weeping lichlights, the spirits of unbaptized children, trapped in a limbo created by the merciless doctrines of men. Their haunting is a quiet question. asked to a God who seems not to answer. Some ghosts are born of neglect and anger. They are the Roman lemures, the spirits of the improperly buried, whose rage is the rage of the forgotten. A demand for the respect that their life was denied. Some are born of duty. They are the great Egyptian Ka, the powerful guardians who haunt their tombs not as a curse, but as a fulfillment of their sacred purpose. Their haunting is the eternal vigilance of a loyal soldier. Some ghosts are born of injustice. They are the Japanese Onryo, the vengeful spirits of the betrayed, whose rage is a terrible and personal form of justice in a world that has none. Their haunting is a moral reckoning. Some are born of greed. They are the monstrous Viking Draugr, the reanimated corpses whose undying avarice makes them a physical plague upon the living. And some, you right, the most terrible of all, are born in the minds of the living. They are the vampires, the shroud eaters, the monsters created by the profound human need to give a face to the formless terror of disease and death. The haunting of their graves is a reflection of the horror in the hearts of the people who stand upon them. You have learned that you can try to explain a ghost with folklore, or you can try to explain it with a barometer. In the end, neither one tells you what it feels like to be afraid in the dark. The true horrifying belief, you write in your final lines, is not that the dead return. It is the belief that they are forgotten. Every ghost story, you conclude, is a demand to be remembered. The unquiet grave is not unquiet because of the one who lies within it. It is unquiet because of the story that is still trying to be told. The grief that has not been resolved. The injustice that has not been answered. The true haunting is the grief of the living, and so your story. The story of the folklorist who walked through the graveyards of the world comes to its own quiet end. You have finished your great work, you have listened to the stories of the dead, and you have found the human truth that lies at the heart of everyone. The mists of the English moors, the sun of the Italian hills, the darkness of the Viking barrow, let them all now recede into the gentle quiet of the past. The ghosts are silent. Their stories have been heard, recorded, and understood. Their miserable legends have been transformed, by the quiet work of a single, patient scholar, into a testament to the enduring power of human belief, human fear, and human sorrow. There are no more ghosts here. There is no more fear. There is only the piece of a story that has been told, of a great work that is finally complete. Let that piece now be yours. Let the silence of the library, the quiet of the empty churchyard, be the silence that welcomes you now into a deep and untroubled sleep.